Immortals Phoenix Rising was Ubisoft's very successful attempt at bucking the trend with their typical franchise releases by creating a totally new IP that went very much against the grain of modern Ubisoft principles.
Show me the money!
Ubisoft and their time-saving transactions have turned into a walking meme factory.
Those prices? Wow.
I'm also the god of thieves. We all have our vices.
Why do Ubisoft want me to think their games are a waste of time to begin with? And if they're not wasting my time, how much better can the game actually become by charging me an arm and a leg for a pair of differently coloured pants?
I'd just wrap any old shit up and give it you. You like this? Tenner. Rip you off.
It's hardly going to increase the trust levels between players and the developers.
Why should they trust you? Look at you, you're a bunch of fucking sleazy salesmen, right?
I could do this all day, but that's enough meme bashing on Ubisoft because Immortals Phoenix Rising is a fantastic game, and with the addition of 3 decent DLCs, which I'll get onto shortly, and an upcoming Immortals Phoenix Rising spin-off game, let's give credit where credit's due. There's a somewhat vaguely interesting story about how Immortals Phoenix Rising even came to be. Not only has it taken inspiration from Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is pretty readily apparent, but the main source of inspiration actually came from a Ubisoft developer finding a bug in Assassin's Creed Odyssey where the player would be sailing the seas and instead of a ship full of human crewmates, the ship was full of Cyclops, or Cyclopes is actually the plural version of that word, and it was just one of those eureka lightbulb moments. Then of course there's the name, Immortals Phoenix Rising. What is that about? What is that, honestly? The game was originally meant to be called Gods and Monsters, but it's rumoured that Monster Energy Drink threatened to take legal action against Ubisoft for an infringement of copyright for the name Monsters, which must have had Monster Hunter World, Lana Del Rey, and the job-searching website Monster.com quaking in their boots. Clearly Ubisoft didn't want the fight, or rather they didn't want to actually spend any money on a fight, and so was born Immortal Phoenix Rising. The combat mechanics are effectively a clone of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and players familiar with Odyssey will recognise the combat feel immediately. I like the combat with the double bumper parrying and perfect dodge slow motion. It's really fun, but aerial combat has been thrown into the mix too, which feels a little more Dante-esque from Devil May Cry, where you'll leap up and maintain airtime while beating the crap out of a bird mid-flight. Also, really fun to execute, and another Devil May Cry similarity is the combo counter too, adding that fun arcadey element to the combat that gives the player that extra incentive other than simply defeating the enemies that are in front of you. Enemies will be obliterated off into the distance when you finish them off, and there's the familiar light and heavy attacks being combined and eventually expanded on by unlocking combos via skill points used in the skill tree. The skill tree is simplistic, but the abilities are meaningful and add a noticeable change to the gameplay after unlocking them, especially the show-stopping godly moves. The bow and arrows, again straight from Assassin's Creed Odyssey playbook for use in combat, as well as the guided missile arrows, which can be used to navigate through tight spaces with precise aiming during the puzzles. I suppose you can play stealthy if you like, though this aspect of the combat really feels like an afterthought, like it's been stitched onto the side of the fast-paced head-on combat, which is way more fun than the stealth approach, with stealth only offering the option to chip a big chunk of health before the real fun gets started. Now, is it even a Ubisoft game if there's no dock-off tower-like structures to climb? Well, we've got that option again, with scouting points that once climbed remove the cloud from the map, only this time you're also given the freedom to enter with Farsight mode, which is a first-person view of the world and can be used at any vantage point so you can highlight the chests and other points of interest in the nearby area. One thing Ubisoft absolutely nailed with Phoenix Rising, and an area they often get criticised for in recent Assassin's Creed games in particular, is the world is much smaller than we're used to seeing, and I'm so grateful for that. I understand the developers want to give players value for money, but for me, there's value in a good ending that actually happens within the first few years that I purchased the bloody game. Put it this way, I know more people that own Assassin's Creed Odyssey that haven't completed it than I do that have completed the game. Immortals Phoenix Rising is a perfectly sized game, certainly for my my needs anyway. The world is split into 7 pleasantly varied sections, each with their own tone and colour palette, making exploring feel expansive and worthwhile. Within 4 of these sections are gods that have main quests tied to them, and once completed they'll reward you with specific blessings from each of them. Exploring feels refreshing, and never did I set out from point A to reach point B without stopping off at 7 or 8 other different locations to uncover mysteries, solve puzzles and unlock different treasures, and I think the new IP plays its part in that because the new map icons were all something that I hadn't seen before. There's plenty of wild, brightly coloured and alluring flora to collect on your travels, like the blue mushrooms to top up your stamina and red pomegranates for health. All of the flora can be crafted into potions to grant Phoenix passive traits, and these can also be upgraded to increase the powers within each potion. A clear yoink of an idea from Breath of the Wild was the stamina gauge, adding minor tactical elements to the scaling of cliff faces and needing to strategically plan your route, looking for ledges to stop off to regain your stamina. All of Phoenix's skills and stats can be upgraded at the Hall of Gods, as well as making changes to his or her appearance and collecting rewards for an in-game and live-timed challenges. Another blatant yoink from Breath of the Wild were the dungeon environmental puzzles to complete, which offer the biggest rewards. Some of these are really fun and engaging puzzles, with some genuine head-scratching puzzles that are satisfying to complete, while others are just plain frustrating, aligning and managing the different styles of blocks and balls that are so easily destroyed with one false move. Out in the open world there's another variety of smaller, less challenging puzzles to complete as well, with the gauntlet parkour time trials, memorising the melody using strings of a giant harp, the fresco puzzles and the constellation puzzles, finding these blue orbs to complete a giant dot to dot. Now, traversing the world is fun and smooth, especially once your stamina bars have been boosted, thanks to this extremely helpful bloke who keeps giving me lightning bolts.
My name is Zeus.
Zeus?
Yeah, Zeus, as in father of Apollo, Mount Olympus. Don't fuck with me or I'll shove a lightning bolt up your ass. Zeus!
The story is set in mythological Greece during a time when it was absolutely mandatory for every single Ubisoft employee to come to work and speak and think only about Greek things.
I'm Greek. My name is Mykonos.
The story follows the Greek soldier Phoenix after being shipwrecked on the Golden Island, discovering the world is being amended, let's say, by the monster Typhon. Now, Typhon has trapped and transformed the 4 gods Athena, Festus, Ares and Aphrodite into strange forms. In essence, the gods have had their essence stolen, with Typhon wreaking havoc on the world, turning the mortal civilization into stone whilst unleashing a few absolutely ghastly monsters, and it's the gods themselves that have turned to the mere mortal to save the day. The story's pretty good, but it's not what the story is in where the magic lies in this game, but it's more in the way that it's told. The game features a light-hearted and comedic tone, with Prometheus being the game's main narrator and Zeus being this mischievous co-narrator that chips in with a smart-ass comment to counter Prometheus at every opportunity. The writing is really good, and it's not exactly going to cause belly-busting laughter, but it did make me smile throughout.
Phoenix would need to free it to find out.
Yeah, but you can tell me now.
Can you please respect my narrative pacing?
Graphically, the obvious comparisons are again Zelda, but the characters have a lot less anime vibes and much more Disney Thunderbird vibes going on instead, which fits the tone of the game quite nicely. The world looks fantastic and the colours just consistently pop no matter where you look. The draw distance is amazing, feeling like you could look north, south, east or west and see every part of the world at any one time. It runs superbly well above 60 frames per second with an i9, a 3090 playing at 4K on the highest settings, virtually no frame drops with a very rare and occasional pop-in. Since release, there's been minimal updates for bug fixes because, shock horror, the game actually released in a very well-polished standard to begin with, but a few cosmetic items and a new Game Plus mode have been added, as well as 3 new pieces of DLC. I bought the Season Pass from Games Planet for those that are interested, currently selling on there for about £12 at the time of making this video at least. I'm not an affiliate or anything, it's just substantially cheaper than most places right now, being less than half price on the retail retail price. The first DLC, A New God, was focused around Olympus, home of the gods, and a new area that acts like a hub to start various challenge trials, similar to the dungeons you can find in the vanilla game. My least favourite out of all the DLC in truth, but plenty of what made Immortals Phoenix Rising so good to begin with. The second DLC was really cool. Myths of the Eastern Realm focuses on Chinese mythology and an entirely new story, a new protagonist, and a new world to explore with new challenges, new weapons and armour, new enemies to fight, and some new puzzle mechanics thrown in there as well. The combat mechanics, these too have had a little tweak with a new combo meter, and weapon strikes have a little more punch to them too, with a very subtle pause before each connection. It feels really nice. Then there's the third and final DLC, The Lost Gods. Offers an entirely new way to play the game from an isometric POV, otherwise known as God's View, with Ash, a new human character, being guided by the Great Phoenix herself, or himself, through another entirely new world. The core pillars of the vanilla game have been translated really well, and a new progression system has been centered around these checkpoint altars to save and upgrade Ash's abilities. Hades makes an appearance quite literally as a character, as well as figuratively, as the Lost Gods DLC clearly takes inspiration from that Game of the Year top-down brawler. All in all, 3 solid pieces of DLC, some of which simply improve on the vanilla experience, while the Lost Gods completely reinvents it and does a pretty good job of doing so as well. There's nothing revolutionary with Immortals Phoenix Rising on the whole here, and many will say it's a Zelda ripoff, but it's far more than that as far as I'm concerned. It's such a fun experience with so much variety in the mechanics, a fantastically written, funny and heartwarming story, and it's all bundled into a totally new IP, which, like I said before, can be a huge risk, but one that's hugely paid off. If you've enjoyed the video and you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, and anyone who wants to help support the channel in continuing to make content like this, there's a Patreon link in the description below. Get in the comments, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Immortals Phoenix Rising, and I'll see you in the next one.